Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a bit of a confession, actually.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I was looking at the calendar this morning, and I realized I have three separate meetings this week. Three, titled something along the lines of AI strategy or Gen AI implementation.
Only three. That sounds like a fairly light week for you.
Right, I know. And honestly, I bet if I asked anyone listening to us right now, look at your own calendar, they'd probably say the exact same thing. It
Yeah.
feels like the entire corporate world is currently just running around with their hair on fire,
Absolute.
trying to figure out exactly where to plug in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, just this massive frenzy.
It's the modern gold rush. I mean, everyone is scrambling to buy shovels, or at the very least, they're talking really loudly about buying shovels so their shareholders can hear them.
Exactly, yes.
You're
And the
right.
narrative we are all being sold, with the one that is in, every op-ed, every single LinkedIn post, every keynote speech, is that we are on the absolute verge of this massive productivity explosion.
The superhuman narrative.
Right, the superhuman narrative. We're told that this technology is the steam engine, the printing press, and the internet just all rolled into one thing. The ground is shifting under our feet, and if you don't move immediately, you're going to fall in.
That is definitely the prevailing mood out there.
But, and this is exactly why I really wanted to do this deep dive today, we have this new analysis we're looking at titled Beyond Automation. And it essentially takes a giant bucket of ice water and throws it on the whole party.
It really does.
So it brings up this concept of the productivity paradox.
It's a really fascinating piece of work, and it's annoying, frankly.
It is annoying because the data is so contradictory.
Right, and this is where we really have to pause and look at what is actually happening beneath the surface. Because if you just skim the headlines, it sounds like AI is fixing absolutely everything in the workplace. But the analysis points out this massive, glaring disconnect.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the numbers cited in the research, the foundational data we're looking at, are honestly staggering. And I want to make sure I get these right, because they almost sound fake when you say them out loud.
They do.
We are seeing individual workers reporting something like 40% quality improvements in their work
That's right, 40% better quality in their output.
and 26% speed gains.
Yeah.
And then for coders, it's even crazier. Coding output is up 38%.
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't small incremental margins. These are superhuman leaps. If you had a magical pill that made you 40% better at your job by tomorrow, you'd be the CEO in a month.
You'd be a billionaire. I mean, in the entire history of economic productivity, you very rarely see jumps like that from a single technology in such a compressed time frame. Usually, organizational productivity grows at, 1 or 2% a year?
Right, exactly. So here is the million-dollar question for us today, or maybe the trillion-dollar question. If I am working 40% better and 26% faster, and you are working 40% better,
Why aren't companies reporting any major impact on their bottom line?
yes, that is the paradox. Why aren't merger timelines compressing? Why isn't the GDP exploding globally? Why aren't we seeing these Fortune 500 companies suddenly move twice as fast?
That is the core conflict we are here to explore. Because the basic assumption we all make is so simple. It's, if I make the individual worker faster, the whole company gets faster.
It seems perfectly logical. 1 + 1 = 2.
But the math isn't adding up in reality.
It's really not.
And the argument here is that this assumption is a fundamental misunderstanding of how work actually happens inside an organization. We're confusing task automation with actual value creation. And the mission of our deep dive today is to figure out why those are two very, very different things.
So we aren't just going to sit here and geek out on cool tech tools today.
No, not at all. We are going to unpack why workflow redesign, and not just buying the latest software license, is the actual secret sauce here. We want to help you move from these temporary productivity shortcuts, which is frankly what most of us are doing right now, to generating actual strategic value.
I really love that distinction.
Yeah.
Shortcuts versus value. So let's start with the reality on the ground, because before we get to the solution, we really have to look at the mess we're currently sitting in. The research talks about this concept of shadow AI.
Which sounds like the title of a spy novel.
It really does, shadow AI. But it's actually just a description of what is happening in literally every office building right now.
It really is. And the data point they provide here is startling. Approximately 50% of American workers are using AI right now.
Half the workforce.
Half.
Yeah.
But, and this is the critical part, they are mostly using consumer-facing tools. They're using the free versions of these platforms, or they've signed up for personal accounts with their own credit cards. And crucially, they aren't telling their bosses about it.
That's the shadow part. It's a
Yeah.
total secret.
It's completely unsanctioned.
It's funny because I bet if you asked a room full of executives right now, are you using AI at your company? They'd all puff up their chests and say, oh, well, we have a steering committee in place. We're running a few very controlled pilots. It's highly experimental right now.
We're currently evaluating the governance structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, half their staff is already using it every single day to write emails, write code, build pitch decks, and strategize.
Yeah.
There is this massive, glaring disconnect between what leadership thinks is happening, which they view as extreme caution, and what is actually happening on the floor, which is the absolute Wild West.
And that disconnect is so dangerous. It's not just a cute communication issue. It's a massive risk issue for the business.
I assume we are mainly talking about data leakage here.
Well, that's the obvious one, right? If you take your company's Q3 strategic roadmap and paste it into a public consumer-facing model, just to get a quick summary for a meeting, you have just potentially trained that model on your company's proprietary IP. You have essentially handed your deepest secrets over to the machine.
Which is very bad.
It's incredibly bad.
Yeah.
But there is another layer to the risk being discussed here, and it's much more subtle. It's about the quality of the work itself. When you have this shadow workforce out there using unsanctioned tools, you get wildly inconsistent quality because no one is actually checking the work against any kind of standard.
Because the boss doesn't even know a robot wrote it in the first place.
Exactly. They assume it's human output. And this leads us to a concept that I think is absolutely critical for you to grasp if you're listening to this. It's called the jagged frontier.
The jagged frontier. I absolutely love this visual. Because normally when we think about the progression of technology, we think of it as a straight line or like a really smooth curve upward. Technology starts with the easy stuff, and then eventually over time, it gets good enough to do the hard stuff.
Right. It's very linear in our heads. First, a computer can do basic arithmetic. Then a few decades later, it can play chess. Then it can recognize a cat in a digital photo. Then eventually it can drive a car. A nice, smooth, predictable slope of progress.
But AI isn't doing that.
Not even a little bit. The frontier of what AI can actually do is jagged. It's spiky. I want you to imagine a giant wall where some sections are 10 feet high and completely impossible to climb, and then right next to it, the wall drops down to 2 inches high, and you can just step right over it.
Right.
But the weirdest part is that the high parts and the low parts are completely mixed together in ways that don't make any intuitive sense to a human brain.
So give us a tangible example of that. What does that jagged wall look like in a real office?
Well, think about high cognitive tasks. We always used to assume those would be the absolute hardest things for a computer to do. Things like analyzing a highly complex legal contract, or brainstorming really out-of-the-box creative marketing ideas, or generating complex Python code from scratch.
The exact stuff we pay people 6 figures a year to do.
Exactly. But AI is surprisingly excellent at these tasks. It actually performs at a superhuman level on them. That's the high part of the wall that the AI just vaults over completely effortlessly.
Okay, so for those tasks, it's an absolute genius.
It is. But then you look at tasks that seem totally simple to a human, like a nuanced business negotiation where you really have to read the room and understand body language, or simply fact-checking a very specific historical citation in a book, or framing an ambiguous problem where you don't even know what the right question to ask is yet.
And how does it do there?
It fails miserably. It hallucinates. It completely makes up fake facts with total confidence. It misses the emotional subtext entirely. It trips right over that 2-inch wall.
So it can write a beautiful Shakespearean sonnet about quantum physics in 10 seconds, but it might struggle to realize that your biggest client is upset just based on the tone of their email.
Exactly. And here's exactly why shadow AI is so incredibly dangerous when you combine it with this jagged frontier.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. The employee doesn't actually know where the frontier is.
Right. They use the tool for a really hard task, like coding a new feature, and it works perfectly. So they think, wow, this thing is an absolute genius. I can completely trust it.
Yeah.
Then the next day, they use it for a task that looks similar to them, but is actually on the complete other side of that jagged frontier, like citing a specific piece of case law precedent, and the AI just completely lies to them.
But because they already trust it from the coding test.
They don't check the work, they just copy and paste it. And because it's shadow AI, their boss doesn't check the work either because they think the employee spent 3 hours researching it. So you get this incredibly dangerous illusion of competence that is masking a massive corporate liability.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's like driving a Ferrari that goes 200 miles an hour perfectly, but then randomly decides to steer itself directly into a tree, but only on Tuesdays.
That is a pretty accurate analogy, actually. And the implication here for a business leader or a department manager is profound. You absolutely cannot just tell your team, hey, go use AI for everything. You can't just apply a blanket, one-size-fits-all strategy. You have to map the actual terrain of your specific work, task by individual task. You have to find the peaks and the valleys of that jagged frontier for your own company.
That seems incredibly difficult to do in practice, because that frontier is probably moving all the time too.
It is moving constantly. Every time there's a new model update, the wall shifts. But simply recognizing that the frontier is jagged in the first place is the mandatory first step. If you stubbornly assume it's a straight line, you are going to give the AI tasks it fundamentally can't handle, and you're going to hold it back from doing tasks it would absolutely crush.
Right. Now, there's another piece of terminology thrown into the mix here that I really want to clarify for everyone. We hear the word chatbot all the time, but the research focuses heavily on this idea of agentic AI.
Yes, this is the next massive leap we're taking.
So how is an agent actually different from me just sitting there chatting with a bot? Is it just a smarter version of a bot? Or is this just Silicon Valley marketing hype?
It's definitely not just hype. It is a fundamental architectural shift in how the software works. Think of a standard chatbot, like the basic interface most people are used to, as a tool that just sits there and waits for you. It is entirely passive. You type a prompt, it gives you an answer. You type another prompt, it gives you another answer.
It's like a really, really smart encyclopedia. It only talks when it's directly spoken to.
Exactly. It has no memory of a broader goal. It is literally just predicting the next most likely word in a sequence. But an agentic system is completely different. It has goals, it has memory, it has autonomy, and crucially, it has access to outside tools.
So it's like an intern.
That is the perfect way to think about it. Think of a chatbot as a very fancy calculator. Think of an agent as a digital intern. Instead of asking a bot to just write a summary of this one document, you task an agent with a broader goal. You say, analyze the competitive market landscape for this specific product launch.
And what does the agent actually do differently?
It doesn't just instantly write a paragraph and stop. It enters a loop of reasoning. It perceives the request. It thinks to itself, okay, to accomplish this goal, I need recent market data. So it autonomously goes out and searches live databases. It reads those results. It might then think, this data is from 2022. That's way too old for a current analysis. I need to run a new search for 2024 data.
Wait, it actively corrects its own mistakes?
Yes, it synthesizes the reports it finds. It might draft an initial summary, then realize that summary is missing a key competitor, go back out to the internet, search again, pull that new data in, and then iterate on the draft. It is autonomously executing a multi-step workflow, not just performing a single isolated task.
That is a staggering difference in utility. Because if I have to sit there and prompt every single individual, search this and then now read this link and then now summarize these 3 paragraphs.
Yeah.
I'm still doing all the managing. I am still the bottleneck in that process.
Exactly. If you have to micromanage the bot to that degree, you really aren't saving yourself that much total time.
But if I can just look at my screen and say, go figure this competitive analysis out, and then I can walk away and come back in an hour.
Now you have actual leverage. And that brings us perfectly to the key takeaway of this entire first section. The real leverage here isn't in automating a single annoying email. It isn't in making one tiny task 10 seconds faster. It is in delegating an entire multi-step workflow to an autonomous agent. That is exactly where you start to see the real exponential power of the technology.
But, and this is the really big but of this whole deep dive, even with these incredible agents, and even with us understanding this jagged frontier, we are still seeing this overarching productivity paradox. We have these truly superhuman tools. We have digital agents that act like tireless interns, but the companies themselves aren't actually moving any faster. And the analysis calls this the structural bottleneck.
Yes. And this is where the conversation gets really, really interesting for anyone who cares about actual organizational dynamics in management.
There's an analogy used in the research that really finally made this click for me. The relay race.
It's a classic, brilliant systems thinking concept.
So I want everyone to picture a standard track and field relay race.
Yeah.
You have 4 runners on a team. Runner number 1 represents the junior associate at the firm. Runner number 2 is the middle manager. Runner 3 is the VP, and so on up the chain. Now let's say we suddenly give runner number 1, the junior associate, a pair of literal rocket boots. They can now run their leg of the race 40% faster.
They are absolutely flying down the track. They are breaking every world record.
Right. And they get to the handoff zone, baton in hand, way ahead of schedule. But Runner number 2, who represents the manager, doesn't have rocket boots. In fact, the manager is standing in knee-deep mud.
And not only are they stuck in the mud, but suddenly, because that associate is running so incredibly fast, the associate is actually handing them a lot more batons.
Oh, right. I didn't even think about that. If I can write my analytical reports 40% faster because of AI, I am sending 40% more reports to my boss's desk for them to review.
Exactly. So the manager is completely overwhelmed. The actual bottleneck in the system hasn't been eliminated. It has just shifted down the line. The total race time for the whole team doesn't change at all because runner 2 is still running at their old baseline speed.
Yeah.
Actually, the race time might even get worse because runner 2 is now completely buried under a massive pile of batons and is panicking.
That is so deeply frustrating to visualize. You just have this huge pile of finished work sitting there waiting on someone's desk doing nothing.
The research gives a highly specific example from the consulting industry that highlights this perfectly. Imagine a mid-sized consulting firm. An associate uses AI to draft a comprehensive client report. They manage to do it 30% faster than normal.
Sounds great, right?
It sounds amazing on paper. You can almost hear the executive saying, "We are now 30% more efficient."
But the partner's review process remains completely unchanged. That partner still has the exact same limited cognitive bandwidth. They can only physically review so many dense reports in a single day. They still have to sit down, read every page, check the logical flow, and think critically about how the client is going to react to the findings. AI does not magically speed up the partner's actual brain. So all that saved time from the junior associate doesn't actually translate into more revenue for the firm or faster delivery to the end client.
No, it just becomes slack inside the system. There's absolutely no margin improvement for the business. It is literally just a faster draft waiting in a longer queue.
So unless you change the handoffs, unless you fundamentally rewrite the rules of the relay race itself, giving people rocket boots is completely useless.
Precisely. All work is deeply embedded in interdependent systems. Unless you change the decision cadences and the handoff points between humans, individual speed means absolutely nothing to the organization as a whole.
There was another case study mentioned that really drove this point home for me, the GitHub Copilot study.
Oh, yes, this is a very famous, highly cited study in the tech world.
So the big flashy headline that everyone saw was, GitHub Copilot users completed their coding tasks 55% faster. That is an enormous number. If you could somehow build a physical house 55% faster, you'd be a billionaire overnight.
Right, and everyone in the industry laser focused on that one number,
Yeah.
55%. But there was a massive but attached to it.
There is always a but.
The real enterprise value, the actual tangible benefit to the software company, only appeared when they entirely redesigned their continuous integration pipelines.
Okay, hold on. Continuous integration. For those of us listening who aren't software engineers by trade, what exactly does that mean?
Think of it as the digital quality control assembly line. When a coder writes a new piece of code, they don't just instantly push a button and put it live on the public website. They send it to an automated machine, the continuous integration or CI system, that rigorously tests it. It asks, does this break the site? Does it have security bugs? Does it conflict with other code?
So it's essentially the safety inspector at the end of the line.
Yes. Now, I want you to imagine you have a team of developers who are suddenly generating code 55% faster. That means they are violently shoving 55% more code into that exact same testing machine.
It's turning a garden hose into a fire hose.
And if the testing machine is still the exact same size,
It just bursts.
it clogs up completely. The entire system breaks down. So for the company to actually get any real value out of that speed, they couldn't just hand the coders the AI tool and walk away. They had to fundamentally redesign the quality gates themselves. They had to build a much bigger, much faster testing pipe to handle the new volume.
And there's a major human element to that change too, right? It wasn't just upgrading servers.
Crucially, yes. The developers themselves had to completely shift their daily role.
Shift how?
They had to actively stop thinking of themselves as code writers and start thinking of themselves as code supervisors.
Oh, wow. That's a really big shift. That is a total identity shift for a professional.
It really is. Because if you don't retrain your people to supervise the AI's output, you just get faster code that might violently break your product. You get a high-speed pileup on the highway. And reviewing someone else's code, even if that someone is a robot, is actually often harder and more cognitively demanding than just writing it yourself from scratch. You need a completely different kind of mental focus.
Supervisors without mastery. That's a specific phrase that popped up in the research, and it actually leads us into something much darker.
Yes. This is exactly where the conversation shifts away from purely logistical bottlenecks and moves into the human element.
We've talked about the tech tools, we've talked about the system bottlenecks, but now we really need to talk about the humans involved, specifically the people at the very bottom of the corporate ladder. The analysis refers to this as the apprenticeship crisis.
This is, in my personal opinion, the most sleepless, night-inducing part of all this research.
I really felt that too. It hit a very raw nerve. Let's make this highly personal for a second. Think about how you actually learned your job. How did you get good at what you do today?
Well, I did the grunt work. I wrote the endless, boring memos. I did the tedious initial research. I summarized hundreds of massive documents. I coded the really basic, boring modules that none of the senior engineers ever wanted to touch.
Right, we all did.
Yeah.
I vividly remember spending countless hours just transcribing interviews word for word. It was mind-numbingly boring.
Yeah.
It was so tedious.
But that is exactly how I learned how people actually talk. That's how my brain learned to spot what a good quote sounds like in real time.
Exactly. Academics call that tacit knowledge. You absolutely cannot learn it from reading a textbook or watching a training video. You only learn it by actively struggling through the mud yourself. You learn the literal texture of the work.
But now AI is doing all of that grunt work.
And it's doing it better and much faster and incredibly cheaper.
So the looming problem here is so obvious. If the junior analysts aren't drafting the initial memo anymore because ChatGPT can spit it out in 4 seconds, how do they ever develop any professional judgment? How do they ever learn domain fluency?
The research calls it the hollowing out of entry-level work, and it is a deeply legitimate crisis. Just look at the legal profession right now.
Yeah, that is a prime, highly visible example.
AI is absolutely fantastic at drafting standard contracts. It drastically reduces the need for junior associates to spend thousands of billable hours just sitting in a room reading boilerplate legal language, which honestly sounds like a mercy. You hear that and think, great, save the juniors from all that misery and boredom.
It definitely feels like a mercy in the short term, but all that incredibly boring reading was actually their training. That was the centuries-old apprenticeship model in action. If you compress that learning curve, or if you eliminate it entirely for the sake of efficiency, you are fundamentally breaking the mechanism that creates future experts.
It's exactly like using a GPS. If I blindly use Google Maps every single time I drive my car, I never actually build a mental map of my own city. If my phone battery dies and the GPS breaks, I am completely lost.
Precisely. And in this specific scenario, the city is your entire professional career.
And it isn't just lawyers facing this. Customer service is another huge sector mentioned in the source material we're looking at today.
Right. The data shows that AI co-pilots are actively helping customer service agents solve individual cases much faster, which is, of course, absolutely fantastic for today's quarterly metrics. But the deep structural concern is that these newer agents might permanently lose the muscle memory required to solve novel, complex problems completely independently.
Because the AI is just always sitting there ready to hold their hand and give them the answer.
Yes, they become completely, utterly dependent on the GPS.
And the long-term liability here is just terrifying if you project this trend out over 5 or 10 years. If companies stop training junior employees today because an AI can do it cheaper right now, who exactly becomes the senior partner in 2035?
Exactly. Who becomes the true expert? We are actively creating an entire generation of supervisors without mastery, people whose entire job is just overseeing AI outputs, but who lack the deep foundational muddy knowledge to actually know when the AI is being subtly, dangerously wrong.
That is such a chilling thought. Just an entire generation of middle managers who don't actually know how the engine of their own industry works. They just know which shiny button to press on a dashboard.
It is a massive hidden liability. We are essentially burning our own furniture just to heat the house for one night. We get this great short-term productivity spike, but we are completely sacrificing the long-term capability pipeline of the entire organization.
Okay, well, that is thoroughly depressing. I feel like we are just staring directly into the abyss right now.
It is definitely heavy stuff, but we absolutely don't have to just sit here in the abyss.
Good, because the analysis doesn't just leave us standing in the ruins of the apprenticeship model. It actually offers highly specific solutions.
It does, and the entire core of the solution goes all the way back to the main theme, workflow redesign.
So we need to completely shift our managerial mindset From a tool rollout, just giving everyone a shiny new login and hoping for the best, to viewing this as a massive redesign challenge.
Correct. And the very first concrete strategy outlined is called task decomposition.
Which sounds very technical and dry, but it's actually a pretty logical concept.
It really is. You have to actively break down a complex process into tiny atomic steps. You can't just look at a broad job description like saying someone is a marketer. You have to look at their actual daily tasks. Write the email subject line, analyze the open rate data, design the header graphic.
And then what?
And then you have to look at every single isolated step and honestly ask, is this specific task sitting on the high part of the jagged frontier? Is this something AI is genuinely good at? Or is this a task that fundamentally requires nuanced human judgment?
So you can't just lazily automate the whole job title. You have to dismantle the job piece by piece and carefully rebuild it.
Exactly. And there's a truly brilliant case study in the material from Pharmaceutical R&D that illustrates this perfectly.
I absolutely love this example because it so clearly shows the difference between simple cost cutting and actual capability expansion. This was the big aha moment for me in the reading.
Yes. So let's look at the old way things were done. You have highly paid, brilliant humans doing manual literature reviews. They are sitting there reading thousands of dense biology papers just trying to find potential new drug targets. It is incredibly slow. It's massively expensive, and it's highly prone to human error just from fatigue.
Enter the AI agents.
Right. So they deploy these autonomous AI agents to constantly scan the global databases and automatically flag interesting findings. Now, pause right here. The lazy management move, the classic cost-cutting move, would be to say, great, the robots can read the papers now. Let's fire half of our research scientists and save a ton of money on payroll.
Which is always the path of least resistance. That is exactly what Wall Street usually demands to see.
But this company didn't do that. They recognized the critical strategic shift. They realized that the AI's true value wasn't in replacing the expensive scientist. It was in dramatically expanding what that science team could actively explore.
So instead of a team researching, say, 5 therapeutic drug targets in a given year,
they could now rigorously research 50. The human scientists shifted their focus entirely to hypothesis generation and complex experimental design, the really high judgment, high value stuff, the exact stuff that sits on the high part of that jagged frontier for humans. Meanwhile, the AI handled the massive grunt work of scanning the literature. The final result wasn't just cheaper science, it was vastly more science. It was fundamentally better science.
This is the definitive fork in the road for literally every CEO listening to us right now.
It is the defining choice of this technological era. Path A is cost reduction. You cut your headcount, you automate the basic tasks, you definitely get a short-term margin gain to show investors, but you completely hollow out your organization's core capability and you lose all your future experts.
And Path B?
Path B is capability expansion. You deliberately use the newly freed up time to do ambitious things you simply couldn't afford to do before. You reinvest the efficiency back into the system.
There was another example in the text that illustrated this beautiful dynamic. Healthcare diagnostics, specifically radiology.
This is such a classic fear scenario. For 10 years, the headline has been, AI will replace radiologists.
Right, we've all heard that. Don't go to med school for radiology. The computer will do it way better.
But this specific health system deliberately took the expansion path. They implemented advanced AI to handle the initial first pass of the scans. The AI rapidly scans the raw images and immediately flags any subtle anomalies.
So the human radiologist isn't just starting from scratch, staring at every single normal image.
No. But the hospital didn't fire any of the radiologists. Instead, they completely redesigned the daily workflow so the doctors could focus all their mental energy on the highly complex, ambiguous cases, and crucially on direct patient communication.
Wait, they actually get to sit down and talk to the patients.
Imagine that. In the old, highly compressed workflow, they were basically just glued to a glowing screen in a dark basement room all day. In the redesigned workflow, they suddenly had the actual time to sit down, explain the complex diagnosis to a terrified patient, and thoughtfully discuss long-term treatment options.
So the final outcome for the hospital was?
Total throughput went up. They could physically see and diagnose more patients per week. But doctor burnout went significantly down.
I mean, that is the holy grail of management.
Capacity massively expanded without expanding the core staff. That is the true power of workflow redesign. If you just try to cut costs, you miss that transformative opportunity entirely. You just end up with a slightly cheaper but much more fragile hospital.
Okay, so if we accept this premise that we absolutely must redesign the work, and we accept that our goal should be capability expansion, we still have to go back and fix the human problem we talked about earlier. We have to address the apprenticeship crisis.
Right. We can't just ignore the junior staff and blindly hope they learn complex skills by pure osmosis from watching a robot work.
The research suggests something called judgment labs.
This is a really fascinating, highly practical concept. The core idea is simple. If the traditional grunt work is gone, you have to actively replace it with something else that teaches the same lessons. You have to artificially manufacture experience.
So how does a judgment lab actually work in practice? Is it like a virtual reality simulation?
The primary example given is from a massive global consulting firm. They deliberately created these mandatory weekly sessions where junior analysts sit in a room and review complex AI outputs. But they don't just passively read them. They are tasked specifically with finding the hidden flaws. They have to debate alternatives with each other.
So instead of the assignment being, go write this 30-page report, the new assignment is, here is a 30-page AI written report. Tell me exactly why it is wrong.
Exactly. It is the definition of deliberate practice. You are fundamentally shifting the primary learning mechanism away from doing the initial draft to rigorously critiquing the draft.
That's actually a really high-level cognitive skill. Critiquing something intelligently is often much harder than just creating something basic.
It really is. It forces these juniors to deeply engage with the underlying logic of the argument, not just the surface-level formatting or grammar. They have to play detective. They have to ask, where is the hidden hallucination in this data? Where is the subtle bias in this strategic recommendation?
That definitely creates a very different, much sharper kind of mental muscle.
Well, the material also heavily emphasized rotational models.
Right, making absolutely sure the junior staff sees the entire end-to-end workflow of the business.
Even the parts the AI is doing completely autonomously. They desperately need to understand what is happening inside the black box. They need to know why the system works so that when it inevitably breaks, and it will definitely break at some point, they actually have the foundational knowledge to fix it.
So we are intentionally training them to be the future architects of the system, not just easily replaceable cogs in the machine.
That's exactly the ultimate goal. We want them to be able to open up the hood and rebuild the engine, not just sit there and drive the car.
Now, let's pivot slightly and talk about governance. Because we started this whole conversation with shadow AI, everyone secretly using unauthorized tools on their personal phones. The analysis has a specific structural solution for this too. It's called federated AI stewardship.
Which is definitely a very fancy corporate term for a very highly practical idea.
It sounds a bit like a government structure from Star Trek.
It kind of does. But it directly addresses the central agonizing tension of modern IT departments. The core problem is that central IT is just historically way too slow. By the time they fully vet and approve a single software tool, there are literally 3 new, vastly superior versions already out on the market.
Yeah. So if you wait for central IT to bless something, your company is dead in the water competitively.
Yeah.
If you just let everyone do whatever they want with company data, you get sued into oblivion.
Exactly. You're caught between stagnation and chaos. So what is the functional middle ground?
Right. What does this federation actually look like?
The middle ground is that central IT focuses solely on setting the non-negotiable safety standards, the absolute guardrails. They say, here is exactly how we must handle PII data. Here is the strict security protocol. Here is the list of public models you are absolutely not allowed to touch under any circumstances.
The 10 Commandments, the thou shalt nots.
Yes. But then, and this is the federated part, the individual business units like marketing, HR, and R&D, they get full authority to pick and deploy the specific tools that fit their unique daily needs as long as they operate completely within those predefined IT guardrails.
So the marketing department can just go grab a new AI copywriting tool on a Tuesday without asking for permission, as long as the tool meets the baseline safety standard already set by IT.
Exactly. They do not need to wait 6 agonizing months for a central review board to meet. There's a great example of a major banking institution, a highly regulated environment that established a responsible AI council. It included senior reps from legal, compliance, and risk management.
And what was their actual mandate?
Their primary job wasn't to sit there and find reasons to say no. Their explicit mandate was to figure out how to approve new tools as quickly as humanly possible while staying within strict risk boundaries.
That completely shifts the entire corporate culture from no unless to yes, provided that.
And maintaining that speed is absolutely essential, because if you bureaucratically block people from using the tools they know will help them, they will just immediately go right back into the shadows. You have to actively make the safe, sanctioned path the absolute easiest path for the employee. People generally want to follow the rules, but they will break them if the rules completely prevent them from hitting their targets.
We are coming into the final stretch of the deep dive here, and I really want to zoom out for a second. We've talked extensively about workflows, we've talked about people, and we've talked about corporate governance. But there is a very raw, physical reality to all of this that we can't ignore.
There is. We definitely tend to think of AI as this magical, ethereal cloud hovering above us, just magic digital dust, but it's not. It is intensely physical.
It eats a staggering amount of electricity.
It eats massive, unprecedented amounts of energy, and it requires highly specialized physical chips that are currently in very short supply.
The research makes a strong point about infrastructure and taking the long view.
It does. It explicitly mentions the need for rigorous energy cost modeling and acknowledging chip scarcity. If you are sitting there building your entire 5-year company strategy purely on assuming limitless AI compute, you need to deeply analyze if you can actually afford to power those systems in 5 years.
Sustainable AI requires massive physical infrastructure investment, not just swiping a credit card for more software licenses. You simply can't subscribe your way out of the laws of physics.
And right alongside that physical infrastructure, you desperately need to build the cultural infrastructure.
Which brings us right back to the human element, the concept of psychological safety.
I know it sounds like an HR buzzword, but it is absolutely crucial in this specific context. If you truly want your people to rigorously redesign their own jobs from the ground up, they have to feel completely safe doing it.
Safe to fail, you mean?
Safe to actively experiment. And safe to openly admit when a shiny new tool isn't actually working. Because if I try out a radical new AI workflow and it totally fails, and I get publicly punished for missing a deadline, I am never, ever trying anything new again.
Or even worse, what if I successfully automate myself out of a job and then you just fire me to save money?
Then no one else in the entire company is ever going to automate their job. Ever.
Right. If I see my coworker Bob brilliantly automate all his weekly reports and then Bob gets unceremoniously let go on Friday, I am going to make absolutely sure my reports take as long as humanly possible to write.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of leadership has to be fostering human-AI collaboration. The humans bring the empathy, the ethical reasoning, and the broad business context. The AI brings the massive pattern recognition and the raw speed. You need a deeply rooted culture that actively values both sides of that equation.
So let's try to wrap all of this up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. It's been quite a journey.
We started by looking at the productivity paradox. The baffling fact that we have these godlike tools generating these 40% efficiency gains at the individual level, but we just aren't seeing the godlike profits at the corporate level yet.
And we found the primary culprit. It's the old legacy workflows. It's that relay race where the second runner is still stuck deep in the mud. It's the structural bottleneck.
We talked extensively about the hidden dangers of the jagged frontier, how the capability wall is incredibly high in some random places and shockingly low in others, and how ignoring that through shadow AI completely blinds us to catastrophic risk.
And we looked closely at the apprenticeship crisis, the very real long-term risk of creating a hollowed-out corporate structure populated entirely by people with no deep expertise.
And finally, we looked at the actual tangible solutions, radically redesigning workflows, using task decomposition, and making that massive fundamental choice between simple cost-cutting and actual capability expansion.
That choice is the absolute key to everything.
So if I am a CEO or a department manager, or honestly just an individual professional trying to navigate my own career right now, what is the ultimate choice here?
The choice is very stark, and the analysis lays it out incredibly clearly. You can choose to view AI purely as a hyper-efficient cost cutter. You can look at that shiny 40% efficiency gain and immediately say, great, let's fire 40% of the staff and boost this quarter's numbers.
And the inevitable result of that path.
You get a great short-term bump. Wall Street applauds you for exactly one quarter. But you completely hollow out your organization, you irrevocably lose your pipeline of future talent, and eventually you hit a massive brick wall because your company has completely lost the fundamental capacity to innovate.
That is path 1, the path of atrophy.
Path 2 is viewing AI as a true capability frontier. You take that hard-won 40% gain and you aggressively reinvest it. You tackle massive, complex challenges that you simply couldn't touch 5 years ago. If you're a hospital, you serve vastly more patients. If you're a pharma company, you research dozens more life-saving drugs. You create fundamentally better, more ambitious products.
You play aggressive offense, not panic defense.
Exactly. You intentionally build an organization that can do things your competitors can't even begin to imagine yet.
I think the most provocative thought for me to take away from this entire deep dive is this. The choice we are facing isn't whether to adopt or not adopt the technology.
No, that ship has completely sailed. It's over.
Your employees are already using it. Right
Okay.
now, the shadow workforce is a reality in your building. The genie is completely out of the bottle.
The only real choice left is whether you step up and lead the redesign yourself or whether you just sit back and let this technology completely fragment your company from the bottom up.
Technology is not the transformation. The workflow redesign is.
That is absolutely the quote to print out and put on the office wall.
Well, thank you so much for unpacking all of this dense material with me. This was, it was intense, but incredibly necessary. I actually feel like I finally understand why all my upcoming AI strategy meetings are so confusing and chaotic right now.
Hopefully you can walk in there and bring some actual structural clarity to them now.
I am definitely going to bring up the relay race analogy. And to you, the listener, don't just blindly buy the new software tool. You have to fundamentally change the race itself. We will see you on the next deep dive.